The lights in Hall 3 went dark exactly 4 seconds before they surrounded her, and I knew right then that someone had planned this for weeks. My name is Kalen Voss, and I was standing at the far end of the corridor when it happened, close enough to see everything, too far to stop any of it. I had come to the Meridian Academy the same year as Mira Callahan, the only human student in our entire class of 80. I had watched her for 11 months. I had never once heard her raise her voice. The 4 students who stepped out from the side rooms were not ordinary students. Orenthal led them, a Dravith boy built like a slab of gray stone, nearly twice human height, with arms that could bend metal railings without strain. Beside him stood 2 more Dravith, Yannick and Bosk, and a Sonari girl named Ilra who could freeze the air around her hands if she concentrated hard enough. They had cornered Mira between the science wing and the transit lift, the one place on campus where the security cameras had been quietly disabled for maintenance that no one had actually requested. I should have shouted. I should have run for a teacher. Instead, I stood frozen at the end of the hall, the same way I always froze, and I watched. Oren spoke first, his voice low and amused, the kind of voice that had never once been told no by anyone smaller than himself. "You should not have entered the trials," he said. "A human has no place standing where real competitors stand." Mira did not answer right away. She held her books against her chest and looked at him the way someone looks at a weather report, calm, unbothered, already 3 steps ahead in her thinking. "I heard she can barely lift her own bag," Yannick said, and the others laughed, though it was the kind of laughter that comes from nerves rather than humor. Ilra raised her hand slightly, frost curling from her fingers, more as a warning than anything else. "Withdraw from the trials," she said. "Tell the instructors you are unwell. No one will question it. Humans get sick easily. Everyone knows that." Mira set her books down slowly on the floor beside her, one at a time, careful not to bend the pages. It was such a small, deliberate motion that for a moment none of the 4 seemed to know what to make of it. "I am not sick," Mira said, "and I am not going to withdraw." Oren stepped closer, his shadow falling completely over her. "Then we will make the decision for you." He reached forward, not to strike her, but simply to grab her shoulder and push her back against the wall, the way someone twice your size does to remind you exactly how small you are. That was his mistake. That was the moment I would replay in my mind for the rest of my life. Mira moved before his hand ever reached her. I do not know the proper words for what I saw, because nothing in our training had ever shown me anything like it. Her body turned sideways in one smooth motion, and Oren's own arm, moving with all the force of his considerable weight, ended up somewhere he had never intended it to go. He staggered forward, off balance, his enormous frame suddenly clumsy and confused, like a machine missing a piece it did not know it needed. He did not fall, but he stumbled hard enough that Yannick had to catch him, and in catching him, Yannick left himself open. Mira slipped past them both without touching either one harder than necessary, redirecting their own momentum instead of matching it with force. She used almost nothing of her own strength. She used theirs, borrowed and returned, over and over, faster than any of them could adjust. Bosk lunged at her from the side, and she simply was not there anymore, already 2 steps to his left, her hand resting lightly on his elbow just long enough to guide his charge harmlessly into the wall beside her. He hit it with a dull thud, and stood there stunned, blinking, trying to understand what had gone wrong. Ilra was the only one who managed to react properly. Frost spread from her palm toward Mira's feet, meant to root her in place. Mira jumped the moment the air began to change, landing lightly just outside the frozen patch, and reached out to gently press 2 fingers against the inside of Ilra's wrist. Ilra's hand shook, the frost faltered, and her concentration broke entirely. "Please stop," Mira said, and her voice had not changed even once through the whole exchange. "I do not want to hurt any of you. I am only trying to protect myself." For a long moment none of them moved. Oren straightened up slowly, breathing hard, staring at her with an expression I had never seen on his face before. It was not anger anymore. It was something closer to disbelief, the look of someone who has just discovered that a fact they were certain of their entire life was completely wrong. Then the emergency lights flickered back on, and a teacher's voice came over the speaker asking why Hall 3 had gone dark, and the 4 of them scattered in different directions before anyone could catch them standing there. Mira picked her books back up off the floor, checked that none of the pages had been damaged, and walked calmly toward her next class. She arrived 2 minutes late. The instructor marked it down without asking why, because at that point nobody outside that hallway understood what had actually happened. I understood, because I had watched every second of it, and I had done nothing to help either side. That thought sat heavy in my chest for the rest of the day. The story did not stay quiet for long. By the end of that afternoon, half the school had heard some version of it, each one stranger than the last. Some said Mira had thrown Oren across the entire hallway. Some said she had frozen Ilra's whole arm solid. None of it was true, but all of it spread anyway, the way rumors do when something unbelievable actually happens in front of witnesses who barely trust their own eyes. I found her at lunch the next day, sitting alone at her usual table near the window, a paper book open in front of her exactly as it always was. I almost did not sit down. Part of me was afraid of her now, though I could not explain why, since she had never given anyone a single reason to fear her before that day. I sat anyway. "I saw what happened in Hall 3, I said. She looked up at me, unreadable, waiting. "Why did you not report it?" I asked. "Oren could have really hurt you. Any of them could have." She closed her book carefully, marking her place with a thin strip of cloth. "They already got in trouble," she said. "The maintenance record showed the cameras had been switched off on purpose. The administration found out within an hour. I did not need to say anything else." "You are not even angry," I said, and I heard the disbelief in my own voice. "Being angry would not have helped me in that hallway," she said. "Staying calm did." I asked her, because I could not stop myself, how she had learned to move like that. I had grown up around Dravith strength and Sonari precision my whole life, and I had never seen anyone counter both at once, calmly, without a single wasted motion. "My mother taught me," she said. "She grew up somewhere that was not always safe. She always told me that being smaller than someone does not mean you are weaker than them. It only means you have to be smarter about how you use what you have." I sat with that for a long moment, turning it over in my mind. On our world, size and raw power decided almost everything, from who led a team to who avoided being challenged in the first place. It had never once occurred to me that someone could take all of that power and simply redirect it, the way water moves around a stone instead of breaking against it. Word of the incident reached the headmaster within 2 days, and an official hearing was called, not to punish Mira, but to determine what should happen to the 4 students who had planned the encounter. I was called as a witness, since I had seen the entire thing from the end of the hallway. Sitting in that small formal room, facing the panel of instructors, I felt my hands shake for the first time in months. I told them everything, exactly as I remembered it. The disabled cameras, the 4 of them surrounding her near the transit lift, Oren's hand reaching for her shoulder, the way she had moved, calm and precise, never once striking any of them harder than she needed to, always redirecting rather than confronting. When it was Mira's turn to speak, she gave her account in under a minute, plain and direct, without a single exaggerated detail. She did not describe herself as brave. She did not describe her own fear, if she had felt any at all. She simply explained what had been said to her, what had been done, and what she had done in response. One of the senior instructors, an older Sonari woman named Director Halverson, asked her a question that stayed with me long after that day. "Where did you learn such complete control?" she asked. "Most students your age, when frightened, either freeze completely or react far more forcefully than necessary. You did neither." "My mother taught me control before she ever taught me anything else," Mira answered. "She said that panic makes you predictable, and predictable people get hurt. She made me practice staying calm long before she ever showed me how to protect myself physically." Director Halverson studied her for a long moment, then turned to the 4 students seated on the other side of the room. Oren sat with his head down, no longer looking anything like the confident boy who had cornered her in that hallway. Yannick and Bosk stared at the floor. Ilra kept glancing toward Mira, as if trying to understand something she could not quite put into words. "The 4 of you underestimated a classmate based on nothing more than her size and her species," Director Halverson said. "That mistake nearly cost you far more than a hearing today. I want each of you to understand something clearly. Strength that only exists in size and force will always eventually meet something it did not expect. Strength built on discipline and control does not have that weakness." The 4 students were suspended from the upcoming trials, and each was required to complete additional lessons on conduct and respect between species before they would be allowed to compete again. It was not a harsh punishment by the standards of our school, but for students who had always relied on their size to avoid consequences, it felt like an earthquake shifting the ground beneath them. After the hearing ended, I walked with Mira back toward the dormitories, neither of us speaking for a while. The campus around us looked exactly the same as it always had, the tall silver towers of the academic wing catching the afternoon light, students moving between buildings in loose groups, laughter drifting from the open courtyard where the younger students practiced simple sparring drills under close supervision. It was strange to think that just 2 days earlier, in a corridor not far from where we now walked, something so different from all of that had taken place. "Does it bother you?" I finally asked. "That they will probably still resent you for this?" She considered the question carefully before answering, the way she considered most things. "Maybe some of them will," she said. "But Ilra came to find me this morning before class. She apologized. She asked if I would show her some of what I used in that hallway, since she said it was the first time in her life she had ever felt outmatched by something other than raw strength. That surprised me more than anything else that had happened so far. Are you going to teach her? I asked. If she is serious about it, yes, Mira said. What I know is not a weapon meant to be kept secret. It is a way of thinking. Anyone can learn it, if they are willing to be patient and honest about their own limits. I asked her then, because I had been wondering it since the moment I first saw her turn Oren's own strength back against him, why she had chosen to enter the trials at all, knowing how much stronger most of the other students were. Strength is not only measured in size, she said. If I let fear decide what I am allowed to attempt, then the fear wins before anything else even happens. I did not enter the trials to prove I was stronger than anyone. I entered because I wanted to prove that being different does not mean being unable. Over the following weeks, something in the atmosphere of the academy shifted, quietly but unmistakably. Students who had once looked past Mira without a second thought now watched her with a kind of careful curiosity. Some avoided her entirely, uncertain how to behave around someone who had calmly outmatched 4 much larger classmates without ever losing her composure. Others, like Ilra, began seeking her out, asking quiet questions about balance, timing, and control, ideas that had never been part of their upbringing. Oren avoided her for almost a month. I noticed him watching her sometimes from across the courtyard, his expression unreadable, somewhere between resentment and something that looked almost like respect he was not yet ready to admit to. Then one afternoon, near the end of that month, I saw him approach her table at lunch, standing there awkwardly for a long moment before finally speaking. I owe you an apology, he said, his voice quieter than I had ever heard it. What I did in that hallway was wrong, and it was based on nothing except assumptions I never bothered to question. Mira looked up at him steadily. Thank you for saying that, she said. It takes more strength to admit a mistake than it does to avoid one in the first place. He nodded, seeming almost relieved that she had not made the moment harder than it needed to be, and after a brief pause, he asked if he could sit down. She gestured to the empty seat across from her without hesitation, and for the first time since the incident, I saw something like real peace settle over the whole situation. The trials took place a few weeks later, and Mira competed exactly as she had planned to from the beginning. She did not win every match, and she never seemed to expect that she would. What she did instead was compete with the same calm control she had shown in that hallway, adjusting to each opponent's strength rather than trying to overpower it, using patience and precision against students who relied entirely on raw power and speed. She lost twice, gracefully, shaking hands with her opponents both times without a trace of frustration. She won 3 matches, including one against a Dravath competitor nearly as large as Oren himself, using the exact same principles that had once turned 4 attackers back on themselves in an empty corridor. After the trials ended, Director Halverson addressed the entire school during the closing ceremony, and though she did not mention the incident in Hall 3 directly, everyone in that room understood exactly what she meant when she spoke about the importance of judging strength by more than size alone. Some of the most important qualities a person can develop, she said, cannot be measured by height or by the force behind a single motion. Discipline, patience, and calm judgment under pressure are strengths that serve someone far longer than raw power ever will, and they can be found in any student, regardless of where they come from or what they look like. I sat in that ceremony thinking about how close I had come to doing nothing at all that day in the hallway, how easily I could have simply looked away and let it happen without ever telling anyone the truth of what I had witnessed. It was Mira who had acted with courage that afternoon, but it was watching her that finally taught me what it meant to stop being a bystander in my own life. Near the end of that term, I asked her one last question, one that had been sitting quietly in the back of my mind since the very first day I met her. I asked her if she had ever been afraid, even once, during those 4 minutes in the hallway, facing 4 students who could have easily overwhelmed her through size alone. She thought about it honestly before answering, the way she always did. I was afraid, she admitted. But being afraid and being unable to act are not the same thing. My mother always told me that courage is not about feeling no fear at all. It is about deciding to act clearly and carefully, even while the fear is still there with you. I have thought about those words many times since that day. On a campus built around students who could crush stone with their bare hands or freeze the air itself with a thought, it was the quietest student among us, the one so many had underestimated without ever giving her a fair chance, who ended up teaching the rest of us the most important lesson any of us would learn that year. Strength is not only what you are born with, sometimes it is what you choose to build, patiently and quietly, long before anyone else ever notices you doing it.